Welcome. My name is Lynn Beeman. I am an educator in Alabama. I have been teaching for about 19 years. 14 of those have been in first grade. I so enjoy exploring social studies with my boys and girls, but I realize that there are so many time constraints within my daily schedule. I often struggle fitting in social studies in an in-depth manner. This summer, while I was undergoing some training, I was introduced to the Nystrom product, Exploring Where and Why. I quickly realized that this was going to be a curriculum that would help me with planning and with those time constraints. This was something that I was going to be able to use weekly to not only teach social studies content, but also to add in those crucial skills in language arts and math. So in today's webinar, I'm going to show how Nystrom's Exploring Where and Why is a cross-curricular program, a program that's going to help you cover the standards in social studies while at the same time adding in those components of language arts, math, and other subjects. So throughout the remainder of the webinar, I'm going to be referring to Exploring Where and Why as EWW. So let's get started. Let's look for just a moment at some of the highlights of the EWW program. First of all, it is hands-on material. You will receive maps and globes and blocks and pins that your students can interact with. Also, it is activity-based. These lessons that you have within your teacher's guide have several activities that you can choose from each time you use them. Exploring Where and Why promotes critical thinking skills, a hot topic in education today, and it also simulates a variety of intelligences. Now, what are some of the outcomes of using EWW? Well, we know as social studies teachers we want to develop responsible citizens, and that is one of the outcomes of EWW. It also develops multicultural awareness and sensitivity. There's a wonderful unit on children of other lands, and we have lots of pictures in the Block Buddies Atlas that go along with this. It also develops critical thinking skills. You can also see your outcomes as you integrate those frequent assessments and evaluations within your lessons. It also provides lots of learning activity opportunities for your diverse populations within your classroom. It is a great program for your students with IEPs as well as those students that are gifted. EWW also ensures success for all students and includes and reinforces reading, writing, math, and other subject matters. So here we see a teacher's guide. It is a K-5 program. However, for today's presentation, I'm going to use the first grade teacher's guide, Neighborhoods Near and Far. Of course, that's the one I'm most familiar with because I am a first grade teacher. So what are we going to do today? First, we're going to look at a definition of cross-curricular instruction. After that, we're going to find in our teacher's guide those cross-curricular suggestions, where they are and how to use them. We're going to look at a lesson example to show how EWW is cross-curricular. We're also going to look at the literacy library, the literacy lessons, and the Atlas lessons to show how those cross-curricular connections can be made. First, I want us to look at a definition of cross-curricular instruction. Cross-curricular instruction is an approach to teaching that integrates the content and skills from multiple content areas into one theme. Often as teachers, we tend to teach math as a separate subject from reading and as a separate subject from social studies and science. And a cross-curricular approach takes all those and puts them into one connected theme. Rather than learning in those separate subjects that are not related, our students can make the connections across the curriculum. When I was teaching kindergarten many years ago, this kind of teaching was called theme-based teaching. And in theme-based teaching, I would have a main topic or a key question of the week, and then I would bring in my math activities, my language arts activities, the art, the music, to teach that topic or answer that key question. For example, if I was teaching, say, on families, I might have my students write about their family. I might have them draw pictures of their family we might graph how many family members were in our household. So you get the idea that that cross-curricular instruction brings it all together. It integrates all of those subjects so that the students can make those connections. And we know that in order to be able to fit everything in, you almost have to do that in today's classroom. Now, where in my teacher's guide do I find those cross-curricular suggestions? Well, when you get your EWW teacher's guide, and this of course is the first grade guide, you're going to go to your scope and sequence page. That is on Roman numeral page 24. Those are in those pages before your units begin. At the bottom, you will see the icons. They highlight the cross-curricular activities. Here they are a little bit bigger so that you can see them. Within your EWW Teacher's Guide, these activities will be called extending ideas. Extending ideas, just to reiterate that. These icons don't just include ideas for the language arts and reading and math, our basic subjects, but also for dramatic play, for music, and my kids' favorite, physical education. So as you can see, there's a variety of cross-curricular activities available in this program to enhance the learning experiences of your students. This also helps make planning so much easier as you're looking for ways to make those connections across the curriculum. Now I want us to take a look at a lesson from our teacher's guide. You are going to notice that within each of the 6 units in your teacher's guide, there are several lessons, and within each of those lessons, you're going to have activities and main goals. So we're going to look at Lesson 5 from Unit 5 entitled Our Country's Weather. Now, as you will see, there are 3 activities and goals there on this page. And I utilize portions actually from several of these activities based on how much time I had for each day. And the beauty of this program is that you can choose from so many options and ideas. If you have 15 minutes one day, then you can complete a 15-minute lesson. If you have 30 minutes another day, you can complete even more. So back to the lesson, we were learning a few months back in science about weather. We were talking about the changing of the seasons and how the weather changes in our state. So on this particular day, we were going to start by comparing seasons. I began by putting winter up on the board, and I asked my students what the weather was like in the winter in our state. Then we moved to our Block Buddy Atlas. Some of my students shared the atlases, and we turned to a page in there that had pictures of Washington, D.C. in the 4 different seasons. We talked about how in some parts of our world, in some parts of our country, winter looks like spring in Washington, D.C. In some places, winter looks like winter in Washington, D.C. And in other places, like Hawaii, in the wintertime, it looked like summer in Washington, D.C. So the students did some comparing there, and we also brought in a little civics and talked about our nation's capital. We then put those Block Buddy atlases away, and we brought out their most favorite, the maps, the desk maps. And here you'll see a picture of that. On the maps, we found, first of all, the United States, and we took our pens and outlined the United States and our state. We talked about how in the winter in our state, it's cold. So we wrote the word cold right on the map, and then we talked about where Alaska is. Now you also have a wall map that you can use on this particular day. I did not get out the wall map, but that would be another way that you could teach this as well. We located Alaska, and we talked about how it's cold in Alaska most of the year, especially in the winter. So they wrote the word cold by Alaska. Then we went to Hawaii, and we talked about how Hawaii in the wintertime looks like Washington, D.C. in the summertime. And they wrote the word hot by Hawaii. Finally, we found the equator, and they took their pens and drew a line all the way across their map to show where the equator is. This led to the discussion of the fact that when you live close to the equator, your weather is going to be mostly warm and hot. When you live far away from the equator, your weather is going to be cold, like in Alaska. Now, one of the neat things that happened a little bit later, actually last week, was yesterday, we were talking about the Pilgrims making their voyage from England over to the New World. And we talked about the fact that they landed at a time very close to winter. We used our Nystrom globe to show that voyage, and I showed them where they landed, and I asked the children what season it was about to be. Of course, they said weather, and I said, well, what's the weather going to be like here in this part of the world? And several of them raised their hand and said they don't live near the equator, so it's going to be cold. So it was very refreshing to see them make the connection and rely on their schema from the lesson that we had learned previously, that yes, when you live further away from the equator, your weather is going to be cold. So when we finished our lesson, I did some summarizing and some assessing as listed here on the slide. And we were then able to, on another day, do a cross-curricular activity by writing about what our favorite season is. We used the pictures from our Block Buddy atlases to guide our writing. Now, another suggestion on that page was to create a class season story. We did not have time to do that, but we could if we had had time. But we were supposed to create a season story, having each student add a phrase to the story. But we did extend the lesson into math. This was a suggestion given on another page of this particular lesson. And we graphed our favorite season, turned it into a bar graph, and had a math lesson based on that. Now that cross-curricular suggestion was on page 204, which is just a couple of pages before this lesson or this activity. So as you can see, this lesson allowed me to teach science while at the same time bring in a nonfiction text to teach language arts skills, geography, civics, when we identified the landmarks of the United States in Washington, D.C., as well as math skills and map skills. So the best part was seeing their faces as they worked together here to outline those states and to draw the equator and the various states on the map. They were so excited and they were so engaged. Now, we all know that books enrich our social studies lessons, while at the same time we can use them to develop those reading and language arts skills. With your EWW cart, you are going to receive, or you have received, an EWW literacy library. This contains 12 nonfiction and fiction books that you can use throughout your lessons. You see here, The Four Seasons Make a Year and I Live in Brooklyn. Those were two stories that I would have been able to use with my lessons about the season had I had a little bit more time. Now, how did I know that? Well, I'm going to show you a neat little, I call it a cheat sheet. Here is our EWW Literacy Library lessons. You receive a book that comes with your literacy library. This little page here in the front is a guide that shows each one of your books in the literacy library. It shows you which unit and which lessons you can teach with that particular book. It's kind of like a cross-reference. So the I Live in Brooklyn book can be used in 5 of the units with 7 different lessons. So this was a valuable little tool. Now within the literacy library lessons in the book, for each individual book, you will see cross-curricular lessons. In the books, in the literacy lessons guide, you will see cross-curricular activities for reading, for math, for science, for writing, many, many activities listed with each book. So this is a valuable reference to use with your literacy library. want to talk just another minute about the BlockBuddy Atlas again. The BlockBuddy Atlas, of course, is a nonfiction text. It has beautiful pictures in it, and your students will enjoy using this, and it will enhance your lessons. Now, of course, using the BlockBuddy Atlas, you can teach those features of nonfiction text. Your BlockBuddy Atlas is available here in print form with your cart. In kindergarten, I believe it is a big book, and if your system has bought Stratalogica or the license to Stratalogica, you can also project it onto your smart board or your InnerWrite board, or also you can get a subscription for that too. Also, in the back of your teacher's guide, you're going to find your Atlas literacy lessons. These go along with your BlockBuddy Atlas. Here is a lesson from the literacy lessons part of your teacher's guide. I chose lesson 1A and 1B. With that BlockBuddy Atlas, you can teach text features. I have used this to do this already in my classroom. We talked about title pages, table of contents, how to find pages within our BlockBuddy Atlas. We talked about the glossary and those special features. We also use the BlockBuddy Atlas to teach the index. Within our system, we are trying to add more nonfiction text into our reading instruction. So it is a wonderful tool. This atlas is a wonderful tool for you to use as you teach those reading skills within the context of social studies. So, as stated before, we have taken a look at a definition of cross-curricular instruction. We have looked at integrating other subjects into our social studies curriculum and how to do that with our EWW Teacher's Guide. We've taken a look at what a lesson looks like as we incorporate those cross-curricular activities. We've talked about the literacy library. We've talked about the BlockBuddy Atlas. We've talked about the literacy library lessons and the Atlas lessons. Whatever you choose, I encourage you to just dive in to that teacher's guide and pick and choose what you want to use. Choose what works for you in your classroom and use those cross-curricular icons to help you in your planning. I will note here on a side note, a couple of weeks ago I was out of the classroom and I pulled out a BlockBuddy Atlas, and I pulled out a lesson for my sub to teach. In the EWW Teacher's Guide, I pulled out the page, I made copies of the sheet that she was going to use with it, and she taught a history lesson along with a grammar lesson, and it was scripted there for her. Now, if you're a novice teacher, the scripted lessons are wonderful for you. If you are a seasoned teacher, you may not want to use the scripted lessons. However, it's there for you so that you can hit the high points of a lesson. Whatever works for you, use it. I promise you that you will be glad that you used the EWW tools, and I know that your students will be glad too.